Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Hi. Hope you're in good health and you're secure, safe. Just did a brief video on presence at the Butsudan. How to approach our practice with our mandala, our mental attitude, that moment of preparation before we start our daimoku and our gongyo, right? What should be going on in those moments? In those, we open our butsudan, we sit up straight, right? And as I showed in that video, I put up another button on the course study page, presence at butsudan. As you know, lots of information on that page. It's all free. So there's a little reminder there of this little mental exercise I'm proposing to prepare yourself. And now we're back into Nichiren and Karma. And we're at a point in, is this still the Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra? I believe it is. What is the name of this Gosha we're in right now? Been doing so many things, I can't keep track of myself. What's going on? Oh, this is a long one. Yeah, Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra. All right. He continues, these passages, he says, refer to the fact that sutras such as the great and vast Buddha Flower Garland Sutra, the Great Collection Sutra, the Great Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, and the Great Nirvana Sutra all have the great, or the character great, in their titles, but not the character myo, or wonderful, or potential. This is because they can only advise, or the word cure is being used here, but the living, but are unable to cure the dead. Here we go, this weird translation logic. Let's get past it. The Lotus Sutra, however, can cure the dead as well as the living, and therefore it has the character myo in its title, Myoho Renge Kyo. Always I have to remind you, because the rhetoric tends to be quite confusing. We're not talking about your dead ancestors and your future children, if any. We're talking about every moment of life, like birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. Right? Moment to moment to moment to moment. I know you guys love to hear me say that. These previous sutras, what he's saying is that they're provisional. They're useful. They're not bad. They're just incomplete. They help us get over the previous moment. They help guide us toward the new moments of birth. But they don't release us from the cycle of birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. You see the difference? Just because you learn how to move forward in the momentum of life doesn't liberate you from the cacophony, the monkey mind, that's the activity of the vicissitudes of constantly changing life. You're still hooked in. But with myo, suddenly you're out of the formations and the form of birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. And now you're an observer removed from birth, death, birth, death, birth, death, birth, death. A complete detachment. Not a loss, not an annihilation, just an observational detachment. So that one can observe with equanimity, without being pulled by good, bad, indifferent. Just is. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. You see the difference? Thus, with the other sutras, persons who should by rights become Buddhas cannot do so, because they're still hooked in. But with the Lotus Sutra, even those who would ordinarily find it impossible to do so can attain Buddhahood. Not to mention those for whom it is relatively easy. This being the case, in the time since the Lotus Sutra was preached, there ought not to be a single person who adheres to the other sutras. That's, again, not because they're invalid, but because they're no longer effective. We now have the ultimate method for self-enlightenment. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. All of the other stuff is informative, but it won't get you here. It can't. It wasn't meant to. It was all preparation, right? Something to remind ourselves of when we sit in front of our Butsudan about to engage with our Buddha-ness. Now the 2,000 years of the former and middle days of the law have passed, and we have entered the latter day of the law. In such an age, it is 100,000, 10,000 million times more difficult for ordinary people to attain Buddhahood or rebirth in the Pure Land than it was for even the persons of the two vehicles or Ichantikas who lived when the Buddha was alive. Just think of the distractions that that occupy our minds constantly, even in our sleep, compared to 2,700 years ago. Ooh, right? And yet people nowadays think that by relying on the Meditation Sutra or some other of the sutras preached in the more than 40 years before the Lotus Sutra, they can escape the sufferings of birth and death. There it is, moment to moment, birth, death. How futile, how utterly futile. Do you see what Nichiren is saying here? He's not saying there's no good information in those early sutras. What he's saying is they're no longer effective. To seek enlightenment, Buddhahood, in those sutras is actually working against your own enlightenment. You will never learn how to drive a Ferrari on a racetrack and compete if you insist on practicing on a skateboard. The skateboard is useful for balance and understanding speed and obstacles, but it doesn't make you a race driver, does it? Let alone standing on the podium with a trophy in your hand. Anyway, women, ladies, whether they live at the time of the Buddha or in the former, middle, or latter days of the law, cannot attain Buddhahood through any teaching but the Lotus Sutra, right? Because only in the Lotus does Shakyamuni specifically call out, right, the Dragon King's daughter, boom, instantly becomes enlightened, Buddha. Doesn't say that anywhere else. Well, obviously, those previous teachings were taught to the people's capacity, and the people's capacity 2,700 years, hell, a decade ago, today. Some people can't accept that women have just as capable a mind as a man. Still today. And yet, 2,700 years ago, Shakyamuni is going, oh, yes, they can. But only in the Lotus teaching. None of the other sutras expounded by any of the Buddhas anywhere can help them. The great teacher Tendai Chiche, who heard Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings at Eagle Peak and later attained an awakening in the place of meditation, has stated unequivocally, quote, the other sutras only predict Buddhahood for men, but not for women. This sutra predicts Buddhahood for all, end quote. Which was Siddhartha's mission from the get-go. Before he left the palace on his quest to figure this out, His motivation was that anyone, without exception, should be able to liberate themselves from these conditions of suffering in the mind. That the suffering was occurring in the mind, let alone, I mean, that was quite a leap to begin with, right? No, the suffering's in my leg. I got it crushed and now it had to be amputated. That's where my suffering is. No. Your suffering about that leg condition is occurring in your mind. Huh? You see what he had to contend with, right? The thus come one Shakyamuni, in the presence of many treasures Buddha and the Buddhas of the 10 directions, preached the Lotus Sutra over a period of 8 years at the palace called Eagle Peak, or Vulture Peak, it depends on the translation you read, northeast of Rajagriha in the kingdom of Magadha. The great teacher Tendai, Chi-che, was present and heard him preach. No, Tendai wasn't alive 2,700 years ago. He was present in mind, because the profundity of Tendai's teachings, Nichiren is examining here, was that he understood the teaching so well that he was present in that very story of the sutra. Now I'll refer back to the document I just posted and I talked about in the last video, presence at the Butsudan. This is what I'm asking you to do before you start chanting or reciting. Immerse yourself, see yourself, envision your moment in the Treasure Tower chapter. You are at Eagle Peak. Namo Myo Renge Kyo, in the presence of all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, everyone. With that mind of preparation, begin your practice. Quote, during my 50 years of teaching, said the Buddha, I have preached various sacred doctrines, all in order to bring benefit to living beings. In the sutras of the first 42 years, I taught that it was not possible for women to attain Buddhahood. But now, with the Lotus Sutra, I declare that women can become Buddhas, end quote. Northeast of Eagle Peak, at a distance of some 108,108, that number appears over and over again, not just in Buddhism, by the way. Beyond the mountains and seas, there is a country called Mahachina in Sanskrit. We know it was China. Some 1,500 years after the Buddha's extinction, there appeared in this country a messenger of the Buddha called the great teacher Tendai, Chi-che, who declared that women could never attain Buddhahood through any teaching other than the Lotus Sutra. Right? This is, 500, 600 years before Nichiren? 3,003 to the east of China, there is a country called Japan. Some 200 years after the great teacher Tendai passed away, he was reborn in this country and bore the name of the great teacher Dengyo, right? Saicho. So, is this a reincarnation? No. That's not what Nichiren is saying. He's saying that I was going to say personage, but that Dengyo embodied the same depth of wisdom that this teacher before him, Tendai, skipped right over Miao-lo for whatever reason, but Tendai was a major benchmark in the history of Buddhist scholarship, so I understand that. He then wrote a work entitled The Outstanding Principles of the Lotus Sutra, in which he stated, Dengyo, quote, Neither teacher nor disciples need undergo countless kalpas of austere practices in order to attain Buddhahood. I'm pausing because I want you to really hear that. This mythology about multiple lifetimes that we continuously encounter in translations. Didn't Dengyo just throw that under the bus? Right? Neither teacher nor disciples need undergo countless kalpas of austere practice in order to attain Buddhahood. Through the power of the Lotus Sutra of the wonderful law, they can do so in their present form, end quote. Buddhahood is here and now, and the form is your sentient mind. What Nichiren would identify as Gohonzon. Thus, he made clear with the Dragon King's daughter was able to become a Buddha. It may seem somewhat difficult for women of the age we live in to attain Buddhahood in their present form, but if they put their trust, their conviction, their confidence in the Lotus Sutra, there's no doubt that they will be reborn in the Pure Land of perfect bliss. That in the next moment, Buddhahood is yours. Can you hang on to it? Can you let it coexist with your samsaric daily life? This is what Nichiren talks about when he says, I'm now living my life each moment in Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. That's our objective. They will reach it more readily than the rivers and streams flowing into the great ocean, or more swiftly than the rain falling from the sky. It's inevitable. You're invoking it when you chant. And yet we find that the women throughout Japan do not chant Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. What? They must not have confidence in it, yeah? Instead, they put their strong resolve in works such as the 2-volume sutra or the meditation sutra, which can never lead women to the Pure Land or to Buddhahood. How sad. They intone the name of the Buddha Amida 60,000 or 100,000 times a day. Amida is indeed the name of a Buddha, and to invoke it would seem to be a laudable practice. But Amida is a story told by Shakyamuni about potential. But because the women who do so are relying upon sutras that can never lead women to Buddhahood or to rebirth in the Pure Land, they are in effect merely counting other people's riches. Right? Because the whole thing about Nembutsu is that your enlightenment won't come till after you die. Well, that's not Buddhism. Buddhism is about the here and now, living this life well. That's what started Siddhartha on his path. So what the hell are you doing? You've taken Buddhism and you've turned it into a religion. This comes about solely because they are led astray by evil teachers. Teachers who either know that they're doing this, consciously doing it, because they're observers of tradition rather than the actual teaching. And whether they're conscious of this or not, I would wager to guess that most of them are not, or willingly not, conscious of this, because they're enjoying their state of tradition. And that's all that they want out of life. How lamentable is that? Right? You don't teach what you don't think you can accomplish. Right? Ego. All the women of Japan face an enemy more fearful than tigers or wolves, mountain bandits or pirates at sea, their parents' foes, or their husbands' concubines. Their real enemies are those who, instead of teaching them the Lotus Sutra, teach them the Nembutsu. Ouch. Only after chanting Namo Myoho Renge Kyo 60,000, 100,000, or even 10 million times a day may women who put their strong resolve in the Lotus Sutra, if they still have some time to spare, now and then murmur to themselves the name of Amida or one of the other Buddhas. But women these days spend their whole lives constantly reciting the name of Amida and busying themselves with matters concerning the Nembutsu. They join the Nembutsu Bridge Club or the bake sale or whatever. They never recite the Lotus Sutra or give alms for its sake. They don't do Gongyo. True, there are a few who have the Lotus Sutra read by those who uphold its teachings, but they look up to the Nembutsu monks as though they were the parents or brothers and treat the upholders of the Lotus Sutra with less respect than they would their retainers or followers. And yet they claim that they are believers in the Lotus Sutra, right? It's fashionable. By contrast, Lady Pure Virtue gave permission for her sons, the two princes, to enter the Buddhist order and encouraged them to propagate the Lotus Sutra. Moreover, the Dragon King's daughter took a vow, saying, "I unfold the doctrines of the great vehicle to rescue living beings from suffering." End quote. These women surely took no vow to practice only the teachings of other sutras and to neglect the practice of the Lotus Sutra. Nevertheless, that is what the women of today do, paying all their attention to the practice of other sutras and none to that of the Lotus Sutra. You must reform your thinking immediately. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo, Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. So, obviously, he wrote this to a woman, wants to encourage her to practice correctly, right? That's the end of that letter. The next one, the 4 debts of gratitude, that should be an interesting one. Thank you for your practice, man or woman. This practice requires effort. It's not easy. But if you perform its simple tasks daily, aligning your mind with Buddha-ness, right? Prepare yourself before you chant. Don't just rush in front of your Butsudan and throw all your dreams and your samsaric attachments at it. What are you doing, right? Let all of those worries, attachments, problems, struggles, whatever they are, put them over there in the trouble basket, and then come over here and enliven your parent, teacher, and sovereign. Awaken your Buddha-ness and watch how easily that basket becomes something manageable that you can make progress through. Right? It's not a magic wand. It's a self-empowerment. Right? It's like when you come to the Butsudan, you're a little baby and there's a bag of bricks in front of you and it's insurmountable and you just fall on your back and ah! But when you chant, you grow. You become a young adult with strength and mobility. And that little bag of bricks, you just pick it up, put it to the side, and walk right through it. It's like the bag of bricks didn't change. Your life condition changed. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you for your practice. Thank you for your support. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps grow the Sangha. It's a little bit of a bodhisattva thing that we can do, yeah? And if you're buying ebooks or buying print books, right, one of the confusions that came up again, somebody said, I saw the book on the bookstore, but it's got 2 wildly different prices. I didn't know what to do. The website isn't super clear. It's in there, but you got to look for it. Of course, one of the books is an e-book that you can download, while the other one is a print book, so it's far more expensive, and there's shipping and all of that. That's why you'll see two different prices. That's why I've considered only putting the ebooks on threefoldlotus.com, just to eliminate that confusion. So just relax, take a breath. It's not hard to figure out, really. But I don't want to deter from my great appreciation, my gratefulness for your support to keep this engine of resource available and growing for all of us. Yeah? Keep our practice strong, free of doubt. So once again, thank you. Take care of your health. Be kind. Keep your practice strong. And I'll see you in the next one, okay? Bye for now.